The rain hammered against the windshield as Nova Delgado pressed her foot harder on the gas pedal. She was already 20 minutes late for her shift at Café Luna, and her manager's threats from last week echoed in her mind. "One more time, Nova, and you're out." But she couldn't leave him there. The man bleeding on the asphalt, his expensive car wrapped around the oak tree, his eyes barely conscious as she knelt beside him in the storm. "Stay with me," she had whispered, her hands pressing against the gash on his forehead, her uniform soaking through as she waited for the ambulance. He'd looked at her then, this stranger with steel-grey eyes and a face that belonged in magazines, and something had shifted in the air between them. Something dangerous. Now, as she finally pulled into the cafe parking lot, Nova's heart sank. Through the rain-streaked windows, she could see her manager's furious face, his arms crossed, waiting. She thought of Ethan, asleep at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, depending on her paycheck for everything, rent, food, his asthma medication. She thought of the man's whispered thank you as the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, how his fingers had briefly touched hers. She had no idea that saving Damian Stone's life would change everything, that the most dangerous man in Los Angeles now knew her name, that by tomorrow she'd be standing in his mansion, holding a job offer that would either save her or destroy her. Nova's hands shook as she untied her apron for the last time. The words "you're fired" still rang in her ears, delivered with the cold efficiency her manager was famous for. 24 hours. That's how long she'd worked at Café Luna before everything fell apart. "I told you, Nova," Marcus had said, not even looking up from his clipboard. "Reliability is everything in this business. You can't just disappear for 2 hours and expect—" "I was helping someone who could have died," she'd interrupted, her voice barely controlled. "There was blood everywhere, and I couldn't just—" "Not my problem," he'd shrugged, already turning away. "Clean out your locker." Now walking through the rain-soaked streets of downtown Los Angeles, Nova felt the familiar weight of desperation settling on her shoulders. Rent was due in a week. Ethan needed new shoes. The electricity bill sat unopened on her kitchen counter because she was afraid to see the final notice. Her phone buzzed. "Mrs. Rodriguez." "Mijo, Ethan is asking when you're coming home. Should I give him dinner?" Nova closed her eyes, leaning against a bus stop. At 5 years old, Ethan was too young to understand why Mommy cried sometimes, why they moved apartments so often, why she worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford the toys other kids had. He just knew she loved him, and somehow that had been enough. Until now. The rain intensified and Nova pulled her thin jacket tighter. She was about to call Mrs. Rodriguez back when a black SUV pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a man in an expensive suit, not the driver, but someone who clearly didn't belong in this neighborhood. "Nova Delgado?" His voice was professional, careful. Every instinct screamed danger. "Who's asking?" "Mr. Stone would like to speak with you." The name hit her like ice water. Stone, the man from the accident. She'd heard the paramedics use his name. But how did he find her? How did he know where she'd be? "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, taking a step back. The man's expression softened slightly. "Miss Delgado, Mr. Stone is very grateful for what you did yesterday. He'd simply like to thank you properly. And perhaps discuss a business proposition." "Business proposition?" Nova's laugh was bitter. "Look at me. What kind of business could I possibly have with someone who rides in cars like this? The kind that might solve some of your current difficulties." The words hung in the air. He knew. Somehow this stranger knew about her job, her problems, her desperation. The smart thing would be to walk away, to disappear into the crowd and never look back. But Ethan's face flashed in her mind. His cough last night, the way he'd tried to hide it so she wouldn't worry. The asthma medication that cost more than she made in a week. "Where?" she heard herself ask. "Mr. Stone's residence. It's not far." Nova looked at the SUV, then at her reflection in the rain puddle at her feet. A woman with no job, no prospects, and a 5-year-old son who deserved better than the life she could give him. "I need to make a phone call first," she said. The man nodded. Of course. As Nova dialed Mrs. Rodriguez's number, She wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, or the decision that would finally save them both. 20 minutes later, the SUV turned through massive iron gates, and Nova's breath caught. The mansion that rose before them looked like something from a movie, all glass and stone and impossible angles, perched on a hillside that overlooked the entire city. This wasn't just wealth. This was power. "Miss Delgado," the man said as they stopped at the front entrance, "a word of advice. Mr. Stone is particular about honesty. Whatever brought you to that street corner yesterday, whatever you're running from, he'll know. The question is whether you tell him first." Nova's heart hammered as she stepped out of the SUV. Through the massive windows, she could see a figure moving in the shadows, tall, broad-shouldered, commanding even from a distance. Damian Stone was waiting for her, and somehow, Nova knew that nothing would ever be the same. The front door opened before Nova could knock, revealing a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an expensive uniform. "Miss Delgado," she said warmly. "I'm Maria, Mr. Stone's housekeeper. He's waiting for you in his study." Nova followed Maria through hallways that seemed to stretch forever, past artwork that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. Everything was pristine, elegant, intimidating. She felt like an intruder in her rain-dampened clothes and scuffed shoes. "Don't be nervous, Mija," Maria whispered as they approached a set of heavy wooden doors. "He's not what people think." Before Nova could ask what she meant, the doors opened. Damian Stone stood behind a massive desk, and Nova's breath caught. Yesterday, covered in blood and rain, he'd seemed human, vulnerable. Today, in a perfectly tailored black suit, he looked like exactly what he was: dangerous. "Miss Delgado." His voice was deeper than she remembered, with an edge that made her skin prickle. "Please sit." She remained standing. "I can't stay long. My son, Ethan," the name stopped her cold, 5 years old, asthma, lives with you in a one-bedroom apartment on Maple Street, currently staying with Mrs. Rodriguez while you look for new employment." The blood drained from Nova's face. "How do you know?" Damian moved around the desk, and she noticed the slight stiffness in his movements, the small bandage at his temple. "Miss Delgado, you saved my life yesterday. Did you think I wouldn't want to know who my guardian angel was?" "I'm not an angel," Nova said quickly. I couldn't leave you there." "No, you couldn't." His grey eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to run. "Even though you knew you'd be late for work, even though you knew what it might cost you, you stayed. Anyone would have—" "No." His voice cut through her protest. "They wouldn't. In my experience, people only help when there's something in it for them. But you—" He paused, something shifting in his expression. "You asked for nothing, expected nothing. You just stayed." The silence stretched between them, heavy with something Nova couldn't name. Finally, Damian returned to his desk, pulling out a folder. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Delgado. I told your driver I don't know what kind of business. I need a housekeeper." The words were simple, direct. "Someone to manage the household staff, oversee meals, handle the day-to-day operations of this place. The position comes with a substantial salary, full benefits, and—" He paused, watching her reaction. "Living quarters, a private wing of the house fully furnished, perfect for a mother and child." Nova's legs suddenly felt weak. "What's the catch?" "Catch? Men like you don't just hand out dream jobs to waitresses they barely know. What do you really want?" For the first time, Damian's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "Men like me. Rich, powerful, dangerous." The last word slipped out before she could stop it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Damian's eyes went cold, predatory. "Dangerous?" Nova lifted her chin, refusing to back down. "I'm not stupid, Mr. Stone. This house, your security, the way people look at you, you're not just some businessman. And that frightens you." "Everything frightens me," she admitted. "But my son needs medicine, and I need a job, and right now you're offering both. So you'll take the position? despite your concerns about my character. Nova thought of Ethan, of the electricity bill, of the way her stomach had been empty for 2 days so he could eat. What are the terms? 6-month trial period. Salary of $8,000 a month plus benefits. You and Ethan move in immediately. You'll have Sundays off and Maria will help you adjust to the household routines. $8,000 a month. Nova had never seen that much money in her entire life. And what happens after 6 months? If we're both satisfied with the arrangement, we discuss making it permanent. And if we're not, Damien's expression was unreadable. Then you leave. With a generous severance package and excellent references. It was too good to be true. Had to be. But as Nova looked around the opulent study, she realized she was out of options. And maybe, just maybe, this was the break she'd been praying for. I'll need to see the living quarters first, she said, and meet the other staff. And I want it in writing that Ethan's safety and well-being are guaranteed. Of course, Damien pressed a button on his desk. Maria will show you around. Take your time. Decide. As Nova turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Miss Delgado, for what it's worth, I don't make offers I don't intend to honor. She looked back at him. This man who could apparently solve all her problems with a signature. And I don't make decisions I can't live with. Good, Damien said softly. Neither do I. But as Maria led her from the room, Nova couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to discover exactly what living with Damien Stone really meant. 3 days later, Nova stood in the kitchen of Damien's mansion at 6 a.m., trying to figure out how her life had changed so completely. The living quarters he'd shown her were bigger than any place she'd ever lived. 2 bedrooms, a sitting area, a bathroom with a tub Ethan could practically swim in. When she'd brought him home from Mrs. Rodriguez's, his eyes had gone wide with wonder. Mommy, is this really ours? He'd whispered, running his small hands over the soft couch, the thick carpet, the toys that had mysteriously appeared in his new bedroom. For now, baby, she'd said, not wanting to promise something that might disappear. But Ethan had already claimed it as home, and seeing him sleep peacefully for the first time in months without coughing, in a room with clean air and a humidifier, made every doubt worth it. You're up early. Damien's voice made her jump, coffee mug slipping from her hands. He caught it before it could hit the floor, his reflexes impossibly quick. For a moment, they stood frozen, his hand covering hers on the mug, his body close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, masculine, dangerous. I wanted to start breakfast before, Nova began, but the words died as she looked up into his eyes. He was staring at her with an intensity that made her pulse race, his thumb unconsciously stroking across her knuckles. The kitchen, massive as it was, suddenly felt too small. Before what? His voice was rougher than usual. Before you left for work, she finished, stepping back. The loss of contact felt like cold air rushing in. I don't usually eat breakfast. You should. The words came out more forceful than she'd intended. You're still recovering from the accident, and your body needs... She stopped, realizing how presumptuous she sounded. I'm sorry. It's not my place to... It is. Damien set the mug down carefully, his eyes never leaving her face. You're in charge of this household now, Nova. That includes making sure I eat. The way he said her name sent shivers down her spine. Not Miss Delgado like he had in his study. Nova, like it meant something. What do you like? She asked, moving toward the refrigerator to put distance between them. Surprise me. As Nova began pulling ingredients from the massive refrigerator, she was acutely aware of Damien watching her every movement. He'd settled into one of the bar stools, coffee in hand, looking completely at ease in his own kitchen, but there was something predatory in his stillness, like a panther deciding whether to pounce. Tell me about Ethan's father, he said suddenly. Nova's hands stilled on the eggs. What? You wear no ring. There are no photos of a man in your belongings. But Ethan exists, which means it's none of your business. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Everything in this house is my business, Nova. She turned to face him, anger flaring. My son is not a thing you own, because you gave me a job. No, Damien agreed, his voice deadly quiet. But his safety is my responsibility now. Yours too. And I can't protect what I don't understand. Protect from what? From whoever might want to hurt me by hurting the people I care about. The words hung in the air between them. People I care about. Nova's heart hammered against her ribs. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know enough. Damien stood, moving toward her with that fluid grace that spoke of violence barely contained. I know you're brave enough to save a stranger. I know you love your son more than your own life. I know you're proud enough to question my motives, even when you need what I'm offering. He stopped inches from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. And I know, he continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, that you feel this too. Feel what? But even as she asked, Nova knew. The electricity that sparked whenever he was near, the way her breath caught when he looked at her, the dangerous pull toward a man who could destroy her with a word. Mommy? Ethan's sleepy voice from the doorway shattered the moment. Nova spun around, her cheeks burning. Hey baby, you're up early. Ethan padded into the kitchen in his new pajamas, rubbing his eyes. I heard voices. Are you making breakfast? I am. Nova's voice was steadier than she felt. Why don't you sit here while I... Who's that? Ethan had spotted Damien, who'd moved back to give them space. This is Mr. Stone, Nova said carefully. He's my boss. We're staying in his house now, remember? Ethan studied Damien with the frank curiosity of a 5-year-old. You're really tall. You're really observant, Damien replied, and Nova was surprised by the gentleness in his voice. Mommy says I get that from my daddy, Ethan said matter-of-factly, but I never met him. He left before I was born. Nova's face burned with embarrassment, but Damien's expression didn't change. That was his loss, he said simply. Ethan beamed. That's what Mommy says too. Can I have pancakes? Pancakes coming up? Nova said quickly, desperate to change the subject. As she cooked, she was aware of Damien watching the interaction between her and Ethan, the way she automatically cut his pancakes into small pieces, how she reminded him to use his inhaler, the gentle way she corrected his table manners. When Ethan asked if he could explore the backyard after breakfast, Damien surprised them both. I'll show you around, he offered. There's a pool and gardens and... Really? Ethan's eyes went wide. Mommy, can I? Nova hesitated. The idea of her son alone with Damien Stone should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself nodding. Just for a little while. And you have to promise to stay where Mr. Stone can see you. I promise. Ethan bounced in his seat. This is the best house ever. As they headed outside, Nova heard Damien's phone ring. His voice changed instantly, becoming cold, authoritative. What do you mean, missing? A pause. Find him. Now. And Marcus? If anyone touches what's mine, they'll wish they'd never been born. The call ended, and Nova felt ice in her veins. This was the man she'd brought her son to live with, the man whose house they now called home, the man who was starting to look at her like she belonged to him too. Through the window, she watched Damien kneel down to Ethan's level, pointing out different flowers in the garden. Her son was laughing, completely at ease with this dangerous stranger, and Nova realized that somewhere between the coffee mug and the pancakes, she'd started to feel at ease too. That was the most terrifying thing of all. The scream shattered Nova's sleep at 3 a.m. She bolted upright, heart hammering, automatically reaching for Ethan's bed before remembering they weren't in their old apartment anymore. The sound had come from somewhere else in the house, a woman's voice, high and desperate. Nova grabbed her robe and ran toward the main house, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. The screaming had stopped, replaced by voices, Damien's low and deadly, and a woman's pleading. Please, Damien, you have to listen to me. I told you never to come here, Isabella. Nova froze at the top of the stairs. Through the partially open door of Damien's study, she could see a woman with long black hair and a designer dress that probably cost more than Nova's old car. Beautiful, elegant, and clearly terrified. He has our daughter, the woman, Isabella, sobbed. Victor has Sophia. He says if you don't give him the shipment, he'll... Our daughter. Damien's voice was ice. You mean the daughter you hid from me for 5 years? The one you claimed didn't exist when you took his money and disappeared? Nova's blood turned to ice. Damien had a daughter, a 5-year-old daughter just like Ethan. "I was protecting her," Isabella cried. "From this life, from what you are, from her father." The words cracked like a whip. "You were protecting her from me. Damien, please, get out. He'll kill her." The silence that followed was more terrifying than the screaming. Nova pressed herself against the wall, knowing she should leave, knowing she was hearing things that could get her killed, but she couldn't move. "Marcus," Damien's voice deadly calm. "Escort Miss Volkov to her car. Make sure she understands that if she ever sets foot on my property again, it will be the last thing she does. Damien, you can't just—" "I can do whatever I want. You made that choice 5 years ago when you decided I wasn't worthy of knowing my own child." Footsteps approached the door. Nova ran, her heart pounding so hard she was sure it would wake Ethan. She made it back to their quarters just as she heard the front door slam. For the next hour, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Damien had a daughter. Someone had kidnapped her. And the woman, Isabella, had hidden the child from him for 5 years. Just like Nova was hiding the truth about Ethan's father. The next morning, Damien was gone before she woke up. Maria explained that he'd had urgent business to attend to, her expression carefully neutral. But Nova could see the worry in the older woman's eyes, the way the other staff moved through the house like they were walking on glass. "Mommy, where's Mr. Stone?" Ethan asked over breakfast. "He said he'd show me the horses today." "He had to work, baby. Maybe later." But later never came. Damien didn't return that night or the next. The house felt different without him, empty despite being full of people. Nova found herself listening for his voice, watching for his car, and hating herself for caring. On the third day, she was in the garden with Ethan when the black SUVs arrived. 3 of them moving fast up the circular drive. Nova grabbed Ethan's hand, pulling him behind one of the large planters, as men in expensive suits poured out of the vehicles. They moved with military precision, surrounding the house, checking windows and doors. "Mommy," Ethan whispered, sensing her fear. "What's happening?" "Shh, baby, just stay quiet." Through the garden she could see more men. These ones rough, dangerous looking, with visible weapons. Not Damien's people, someone else's. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Bring the boy to the front gate, now, or everyone in that house dies." Nova's blood turned to ice. They knew about Ethan. Somehow, they knew. Another text. "You have 5 minutes." "Mommy, I'm scared," Ethan whispered. Nova looked at her son, her beautiful, innocent son who had nothing to do with this world of violence and secrets. Then she looked at the house where Maria and the other staff were going about their daily routines, unaware of the danger surrounding them. She thought of Damien, wherever he was, and the daughter he was trying to save, and she made a choice that would change everything. "Ethan," she whispered, pulling out her phone. "I need you to run to the house and find Maria. Tell her to call Mr. Stone and say the wolves are at the door. Can you remember that? The wolves are at the door." "But, Mommy—" "Go, now. Run as fast as you can and don't look back." As Ethan ran toward the house, Nova stood up, walking slowly toward the front gate. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she called out, "I'm here, but the boy stays in the house." A man stepped forward, tall, blonde, with cold blue eyes and a smile that made her skin crawl. "Miss Delgado," he said in accented English. "Victor Kozlov, I believe we need to talk." As the gate opened and hands reached for her, Nova's last thought was a prayer that Damien would come home in time to save his real family. She just hoped he'd remember to save hers too. The warehouse smelled of rust and fear. Nova's wrists burned from the zip ties, but she forced herself to stay calm. Across the concrete floor, she could see another chair, empty, but with restraints that looked like they'd been used recently. "You're wondering about the other chair," Victor Kozlov said, following her gaze. He was handsome in a cold, sharp way like a knife designed to look pretty before it cut you. That's where Damien's daughter was sitting, until an hour ago. Nova's heart lurched. "What did you do to her?" "Nothing, yet." Victor circled her chair like a predator. "But that depends entirely on how cooperative Mr. Stone decides to be. I don't understand what this has to do with me. I'm just his housekeeper." Victor laughed, the sound echoing off the warehouse walls. "Just his housekeeper. Miss Delgado, you've been living in his house for less than a week, and already he's moved you into the family wing. Already his security detail has been expanded to include protection for you and your son. Men like Damien Stone don't make those kinds of arrangements for the help." "You're wrong. Am I?" Victor pulled out his phone, showing her a photo that made her blood freeze. It was her and Damien in the kitchen 3 days ago, the moment when he'd caught her coffee mug, when they'd stood so close she could feel his heartbeat. "He looks at you the way a man looks at something he wants to keep." The warehouse door slammed open, and Nova's heart leaped as Damien strode in, flanked by 6 men in black tactical gear, but her relief died when she saw his face, cold, controlled, absolutely lethal. "Victor." His voice could have cut glass. "You made a mistake." "Did I?" Victor moved behind Nova's chair, his hand settling on her shoulder in a gesture that made her skin crawl. "I don't think so. You see, I've learned something interesting about your new employee." Damien's eyes flicked to Nova, and she saw something flash across his face. Concern, anger, something deeper. "Let her go. Your quarrel is with me." "Oh, but she's so much more interesting than I initially thought." Victor's fingers tightened on Nova's shoulder. "Tell him, Miss Delgado. Tell him about Ethan's father." Nova's world tilted. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" Victor leaned down, his breath hot against her ear. "Tell him about the one night 5 years ago. Tell him about the man you met at that charity gala where you were working as a server. The man who was so drunk he didn't remember your name the next morning." "Stop," Nova whispered. But Victor continued relentlessly. "Tell him about the DNA test you had done last month, when you finally saved enough money. The one that confirmed what you'd suspected all along." Damien had gone completely still, his face a mask of ice and fury. "What is he talking about, Nova?" Nova looked at the man who'd given her a job, a home, a chance at a better life. The man whose daughter was missing because of her. "I can't." "Then I'll tell him," Victor said cheerfully. "Ethan isn't just any 5-year-old boy, Damien. He's your 5-year-old boy. Your son. The son she's been hiding from you, just like Isabella hid Sophia." The silence that followed was deafening. Nova watched as understanding dawned in Damien's eyes, followed by something that looked like betrayal. "Is it true?" His voice was barely human. Nova closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. You knew." It wasn't a question. "All this time, you knew, and you said nothing." "I was protecting him. From me." The words were flat, dead. "Like Isabella, like every woman who's ever claimed to love me. You were protecting him from his own father." "Damien, please." "Touching," Victor interrupted. "But we have business to conclude. The shipment, Damien, in exchange for both your children." "Both?" Nova's head snapped up. Victor smiled. "Oh yes, my dear. Your son is here too. My men collected him from the house after you so helpfully led them away from him. He's with Sophia now in a much less comfortable location." Damien's control finally cracked. "If you've hurt them, they're unharmed for now. But children are so fragile, aren't they? So easy to break." The rage that crossed Damien's face was terrifying. Nova had never seen anything like it. Pure, murderous fury barely contained by will alone. "The shipment," Victor continued, "in exchange for your son and daughter. You have 1 hour." "Done," Damien said immediately. "But I want proof of life first." Victor nodded to one of his men who brought over a tablet. The screen showed a small room where 2 children sat huddled together, a little girl with dark hair and Damien's grey eyes, and Ethan, his arm protectively around her as she cried. "Sophia," Damien breathed, and Nova heard 5 years of loss and love in that single word. "They're scared but unharmed," Victor said. "Let's keep it that way." As Victor's men prepared to move them to the exchange location, Nova caught Damien's eye. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." For a moment his mask slipped, and she saw the pain underneath. "So am I," he said quietly, "for all of it." The exchange happened at midnight on the docks. Nova watched from inside Victor's car, as Damien's men unloaded crate after crate from a truck, while Victor's people verified the contents. The tension was thick enough to cut. "Satisfied?" Damien called out. "Almost." Victor stepped out of the car, dragging Nova with him. "But I think we need to discuss the terms of our future relationship." "There is no future relationship. You have what you wanted." "Do I?" Victor pressed a gun to Nova's temple. "Because I'm thinking that having leverage over the great Damien stone might be more valuable than any shipment." That's when Nova saw it, the slight hand signal Damien gave to his men, the almost imperceptible shift in their positions. "You know what I think, Victor?" Damien's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "I think you made a fundamental error in judgment." "Oh, and what's that?" Damien smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Nova had ever seen. "You touched what's mine." The next 30 seconds were chaos. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions as Damien's men, who had apparently been in position for hours, opened fire. Victor's grip on Nova loosened as he spun toward the threat, and she threw herself to the ground. When the shooting stopped, Victor was dead and Damien was running toward a shipping container where muffled cries could be heard. The door burst open and Ethan flew into Nova's arms, followed by a little girl who launched herself at Damien with a sob of, "Daddy." "Are you hurt?" Damien asked, his hands checking Sophia for injuries, even as his eyes found Nova and Ethan. "Either of you?" "We're okay," Nova said, holding Ethan tight. "We're okay." For a moment, they stood there in the aftermath, 2 parents, 2 children, surrounded by the wreckage of violence and secrets. "Mommy," Ethan said, looking between Nova and Damien, "is he really my daddy?" Nova looked at Damien, seeing her own fear reflected in his eyes. "Yes, baby, he is." "Cool," Ethan said matter-of-factly. "Does this mean we get to keep the horses?" Despite everything, Damien laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. "Yeah, kid, you get to keep the horses." As they walked back to the cars, Sophia's hand in Damien's and Ethan between them, Nova felt something shift in the air. The secrets were out. The danger was over, but the hardest part, learning to be a family, was just beginning. "Nova," Damien said quietly as they reached the car, "we need to talk." "I know," she said, "about everything." "Everything," he agreed. Then, so softly she almost missed it, "You belong to me now, both of you, and I protect what's mine." As they drove home through the Los Angeles night, Nova realized that sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't falling for the wrong man. Sometimes it was falling for the right one. Years later, Nova woke to the sound of laughter echoing from the garden below. Through the bedroom window, she could see Damien chasing Ethan and Sophia around the pool, all 3 of them soaking wet and grinning. At 8 and 7, respectively, the children had formed an unbreakable bond, partners in crime who could reduce their father to putty with a single coordinated assault of hugs and pleading eyes. "You're watching them again," Damien's voice came from behind her, as strong arms wrapped around her waist. "When did you sneak back in?" she asked, leaning into his warmth. "When you were lost in thought. Penny for them." Nova smiled, placing her hands over his. "Just thinking about how different everything is now." "Different how?" "I used to be afraid of not having enough," she said. "Enough money, enough food, enough security for Ethan. Now I'm afraid of having too much happiness, like it might disappear if I'm not careful." Damien turned her in his arms, his grey eyes serious. "It's not going anywhere, Nova. We're not going anywhere. Promise?" Instead of answering with words, he kissed her, soft, deep, full of the love that had grown between them through honesty and time and the daily choice to build something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. "Mommy, Daddy," Sophia's voice carried up from the garden. "Ethan says you're being gross again." "We're not being gross," Nova called back, laughing. "Yes, you are," Ethan shouted. "Come swimming, the water's perfect." "In a minute," Damien replied, but his arms tightened around Nova. "We should go down," she said, not moving. "We should," he agreed, not releasing her. They'd been married for 2 years now, but Nova still sometimes marveled at the life they'd built. Damien had gradually stepped back from the darker aspects of his business, focusing on the legitimate enterprises that had always been his ultimate goal. The children attended the best schools, had the best medical care, wanted for nothing, but more importantly, they were loved, protected, cherished. "I have something for you," Damien said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "It's not my birthday," Nova protested, even as her heart fluttered. "It's the anniversary of the day you saved my life," he said, opening the box to reveal a delicate necklace with a pendant shaped like a star. "5 years ago today, you stopped on a rainy street to help a stranger. You changed everything." Nova's eyes filled with tears as he fastened the necklace around her throat. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he said. "Both of you, all of you, my family. Daddy, Mommy, are you coming or not?" Sophia's impatient voice made them both laugh. "Coming!" they called in unison. As they headed downstairs, Nova caught sight of their reflection in the hallway mirror. Damien in swim trunks and a t-shirt, his hair still damp from the pool, herself in a simple sundress, the star necklace catching the light. They looked like any normal family heading out for an afternoon swim, and maybe that's exactly what they were now. "Race you to the pool," Damien said with a grin that made him look years younger. "You're on," Nova replied, taking off at a run. Behind them, the house stood solid and beautiful in the California sunshine, no longer just a mansion but a home, a place where a former waitress and a reformed crime boss had learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other every single day and building something worth protecting. As Nova hit the water with a splash, surrounded by the laughter of her children and the love of her husband, she realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. She'd found her place in the world, and it was right here, in the arms of the most dangerous man in Los Angeles, who'd turned out to be the safest place she'd ever known.